Dear students, in this paper of forensic psychology, after studying this module, you shall be able to know about the significance of social learning theory, importance of social learning theories in evaluating the criminal behavior, and important theories of social learning and their applications. Social or observational learning theory stipulates that people can learn new behaviors by observing others. Earlier, learning theories emphasized how people behave in response to environmental stimuli, such as physical rewards or punishment. In contrast, social learning emphasizes the reciprocal relationship between social characteristics of the environment, how they are perceived by individuals, and how motivated and able a person is to reproduce behaviors they see happening around them. People both influence and are influenced by the world around them. Social learning theory has been used to explain the emergence and maintenance of deviant behavior, especially aggression. Criminologists Ronald Akers and Robert Burgess integrated the principles of social learning theory and operant conditioning with Edwin Sutherland's differential association theory to create a comprehensive theory of criminal behavior. Burgess and Akers emphasized that criminal behavior is learned in both social and non-social situations through combinations of direct reinforcement, vicarious reinforcement, explicit instruction, and observation. Both the probability of being exposed to certain behaviors and the nature of the reinforcement are dependent on group norms. According to social learning theory, people learn by perceiving what other people do, considering that apparent consequences experienced by those people, rehearsing at first mentally what might happen in their own lives if they followed the other people's behavior, taking action by trying the behavior themselves, comparing their experiences with what happened to the other people, and confirming their belief in the new behavior. Over the last 30 years, social learning theory has remained a vital part in the understanding both criminal and non-criminal behavior. The concept is also maybe one of the most tested up-to-date theories of crime and deviance and has gone through considerable elaboration and testing. The principles of social learning can be applied to almost social and behavior change communication program that aims to influence social behaviors, particularly behaviors that are complex or involve interactions with other people. It may be especially useful when a particular behavior is difficult to describe, but can be explained through demonstration or modeling. Also, when adopting or practicing a particular behavior requires overcoming barriers or challenges. Social learning principles can be used to demonstrate how a person can overcome those challenges and succeed. Finally, because people tend to adopt and practice behaviors they see others doing, social learning principles can be used to change perceptions of the social environment, making behaviors seem more common and providing social support to people who are considering a behavior change. Mostly, there are three important theories dealing with the principle of social learning. They are Sutherland's differential association theory, Akers' reinforcement theory, and Bandura's modeling and imitation theory. First is differential association theory by Edwin Sutherland. Differential association theory was developed by Edwin Sutherland, proposing that through interaction with others, individuals learn the values, attitudes, techniques, and motives for criminal behavior. The differential association theory is the most talked about of the learning theories of deviance. This theory focuses on how an individual learns to become a criminal, but does not concern itself with why he becomes criminal. Learning theory is considered a positivist approach. Sutherland has developed the idea of the self as a social construct, as when a person's self-image is continuously being reconstructed, especially while interacting with other people. People define their lives by reference to their experiences and then generalize those definitions to provide a framework or reference for deciding on future action. Differential association predicts that an individual will choose the criminal path when the balance of definitions for law-breaking exceeds those for law-abiding. This tendency will be reinforced if social association provides active people in the person's life. Earlier in life, the individual comes under the influence of those of high status within that group, the more likely the individual to follow in their footsteps. This cannot be denied that there may be practical motives for crime. If a person is hungry but has no money, there is a temptation to steal, but the use of needs and values is equivocal. To a greater or lesser extent, both non-criminal and criminal individuals are motivated by the need for money and social gain. Fundamental arguments of Sutherland's theory. The main facts of Sutherland's theory of differential association are as follows. Criminal behavior is learned. Criminal behavior is learned in interaction with other persons in a process of communication. The principal part of the learning of criminal behavior occurs within the intimate personal groups. When criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes A. Techniques of committing the crime, which are sometimes very complicated and sometimes simple. B. The specific direction of motives, drives, rationalizations and attitudes. The specific direction of motives and drives is learned from definitions of the legal codes as favorable or unfavorable. A person becomes delinquent because of an excess of definitions favorable to violation of law over definitions unfavorable to violation of the law. Differential associations may vary in frequency, duration, priority and intensity. The process of learning criminal behavior by association with criminal and anti-criminal patterns involves all of the mechanisms that are involved in any other learning. While criminal behavior is an expression of general needs and values, it is not explained by those needs and values, since non-criminal behavior is an expression of the same needs and values. A significant quality of differential association theory deals with the frequency and intensity of interaction. The extent of time that a person is exposed to a particular definition and at what point the interaction began are both crucial for explaining criminal activity. The procedure of learning criminal behavior is really not any diverse from the process involved in learning any other type of behavior. Sutherland preserves that there is no sole learning process linked with obtaining non-normative means of behaving. One very exclusive feature of this theory is that the theory significances to enlighten more than just juvenile delinquency and crime committed by lower class persons. Subsequently, crime is assumed to be learned behavior. The theory is also appropriate to white-collar, corporate and pre-arranged crime. Criticism of Sutherland's theory. Critics often claim that persons can be autonomous, balanced actors and individually motivated. This notion of one being a criminal based on his or her environment is problematic. This theory does not consider personality traits that may affect an individual's vulnerability to these environmental effects. Next is reinforcement theory by Ronald L. Akers. Akers retains the process of differential association and expands upon it in his theory. One of the most popular theories of criminal behavior, especially among sociologists and social psychologists, is the notion that criminal behavior is a learned behavior. The theory of differential association put forth by Edwin Sutherland is a learning theory which formulates the process as one whereby criminal behavior is learned in association with those who have criminal attitudes and values, as compared to associations with those who have non-criminal attitudes and values. Criminal behavior is operant behavior, that is, it is maintained by the changes it produces on the environment. The theory of differential reinforcement states that a criminal act occurs in an environment in which in the past the actor has been reinforced for behaving in this manner, and the aversive consequences attached to the behavior have been of such a nature that they do not control or prevent the response. Criminal behavior is under the control of reinforcing stimuli. The theory, as proposed by Akers, is concentrated around the idea that the same learning process in a context of social structure, interaction and situation produces both conforming and deviant behavior. The likelihood that public will involve in criminal and unusual behavior is amplified, and the possibility of their following the norm is decreased when the differentiality associated with those having criminal behavior and expose descriptions favorable to it are comparatively more visible in person or characteristically to noticeable criminal or deviant models. Describe it as desired or acceptable in a state discrimination for the behavior and have received in the past and anticipate in the current or future situation relatively greater reward than punishment for the behavior. Fundamental arguments of Akers' theory. According to Akers and Sellers, the social learning theory embodies within it four fundamental components that include differential association, descriptions, differential reinforcement, and simulation. Differential association. Differential association theory can be understood as comprising two important dimensions. The first measurement is behavioral interactional and enlightens unconventionality as being manufactured through direct link and communication with others who involve in certain kinds of behavior, as well as indirect association and identification with more distant reference groups. When an individual directly or indirectly comes in contact with other people or groups in social context, each of the four premises of social learning theory starts functioning. That is, within this social context, individuals are exposed to varying definitions of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, as well as a variety of behavioral representations that may differentially reinforce criminal and non-criminal behavior. These representations may also assist as a basis for the imitating of behavior. Social learning theories have divided these groups into two categories, that is, primary and secondary sources. Primary relations comprise those with close family and friends. Secondary sources of communal learning include a much wider range of people and would include teachers, neighbors, etc. Each of these groups is thought to contribute to the attitudes and values that an individual adopts, as well as to how that person behaves in different social contexts. Definitions. Definitions in context with social learning theory are a person's own morals and approaches about what is and is not tolerable behavior. That is, they are directions, validations, descriptions of the state and other evaluative and moral approaches that define the carrying of an act as right or wrong, good or bad, desirable or undesirable, justified or unjustified. These approaches and morals are learned and reinforced through the procedure of variance association. Social learning theory links attitudes and values to the influence of common and precise definitions. General definitions include broad beliefs about conforming behavior that is influenced principally through conventional norms, religious and moral values. These philosophies are believed usually to be those that do not support the commission of criminal or deviant actions. Precise definitions are those that orient a person to a particular act or a series of acts. The basic theme behind this notion of definitions is that greater the number of definitions favorable to deviant or criminal behavior, the greater the likelihood that an individual will take role in that type of conduct. Social learning theory also accounts for conforming behavior to the extent that the greater the number of definitions favorable to conventional norms, the less likely an individual is to engage in deviant or criminal acts. It is feasible within this considerate of social learning that a person could accept following attitudes and morals about certain behaviors while at the same time develop approaches and morals that justify or excuse some types of non-conforming behaviors. Next is differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement can mainly be understood as the method by which individuals feel and anticipate the consequences of their behaviors. That is, an individual's actions are in portion determined by what they observe as the significance of their act or lack of act will be. Whether persons will abstain from or commit a crime at any specified time depends on the past, present and expected future rewards and sentences for their actions. Reinforcement of attitudes, beliefs and morals happens over both differential relationship and imitation and can be either positive or negative. Positive reinforcement happens when movements are rewarded by positive responses to the behavior as well as by positive results. Positive reinforcement can raise the likelihood of criminal behavior through these rewards. Negative reinforcement, on the other side, includes the removal of negative consequences or responses, and this may also increase the likelihood of taking certain actions. Next is imitation. Imitation, as its name implies, is the notion that individuals engage in behavior that they have previously witnessed others doing. The extent up to which behaviors are copied is largely determined by the behavior witnessed and the observed consequences of the behavior. The literature has specified that witnessing the movements of others in specific individuals that are close can affect involvement in both conforming and non-conforming behaviors. Imitation has also been seen to be more significant in the primary acquisition and presentation of innovative performance than in its preservation or termination of behavioral patterns once established. Criticism of Acres theory. One of the major criticisms of Acres theory pertains to its principal concept that increased associations with deviant peers increases the likelihood that an individual will adopt attitudes and values favorable to criminal conduct through the mechanism of rewards and punishments. The critic focused on the temporal ordering of the adoption of deviant attitudes and behaviors and the association with other deviant peers. Next is modeling and imitation theory by Albert Bandura. Social learning theory of Bandura suggests that learning is an intellectual method that takes place in social relation and can ensue purely through observation or direct instruction, even in the absenteeism of motor reproduction or direct reinforcement. In addition to the thought of behavior, learning also occurs by the observation of rewards and penalties, a process called as vicarious reinforcement. The theory grows on traditional behavior theories, in which behavior is administered uniquely by reinforcements, by putting stress on the vital roles of various interior processes in the learning of a person. Within this context, Albert Bandura studied learning processes that occurred in the interpersonal context. Precisely, Bandura claimed that the weaknesses of learning leads that decrease the effect of social variables are nowhere more evidently discovered than in their management of the achievement of novel reactions. Bandura initiated to conduct studies of the swift acquisition of novel behaviors via social observation, the most well-known of which were the Bobo doll experiments. Fundamental arguments of Bandura's theory. Social learning theory combined behavioral and perceptive theories of learning in a way to offer a wide-ranging model that could account for the extensive range of learning experiences that occur in the real world. As originally marked by Bandura and Walters in 1963 and additionally detailed in 1977, key beliefs of social learning theory are as given. Learning is not purely behavioral, rather it is a cognitive process that takes place in a social context. Learning can occur by observing a behavior and by observing the consequences of the behavior. Learning includes observation, taking out information from those observations and forming judgments about the presentation of the behavior. This is called observational learning or modeling. Thus, learning can take place without an observable alteration in behavior. Reinforcement has a role in learning but is not completely accountable for learning. The learner is not a passive recipient of information. Cognition, environment, and behavior all mutually influence each other. Social learning theory is based mainly on the perception of modeling or learning by noticing a behavior. Bandura outlined the following three kinds of modeling stimuli. A. Live model, in which a real person is representing the desired behavior. B. Verbal instruction, in which a person explains the preferred behavior in detail and educates the member in how to involve in the behavior. C. Symbolic, in which modeling occurs by means of the media, including movies, television, internet, literature, radio, etc. Stimuli can be both actual and fictional characters. Precisely, the information gathered from observation is inclined by the kind of model as well as a sequence of cognitive and behavioral procedures including attention. In order to learn, observers must attend to the modeled behavior. Attention is impacted by characteristics of the observer and characteristics of the behavior or event. Retention. In order to reproduce and observe behavior, observers must be able to remember features of the behavior. Again, this process is influenced by observer characteristics and event characteristics. Reproduction. To replicate a behavior, the viewer must organize responses in accordance with the model. Observer characteristics affecting reproduction include physical and cognitive capabilities and previous performance. Motivation. The decision to reproduce and observe behavior is dependent on the motivations and expectations of the observer, including anticipated consequences and internal standards. An important factor in social learning theory is the concept of reciprocal determinism. This view says that just as a person's behavior is partial by the environment is also subjective by the person's behavior. In other words, a person's behavior, environment, and personal qualities all reciprocally influence each other. For example, a child who plays vicious video games will possibly affect their peers to play as well, which then inspires the child to play more regularly. This could lead to the child becoming insensitive to violence, which in turn will affect probably the child's actual life behaviors. Applications of social learning theories. Criminology. Social learning theories have been used to describe the advent and preservation of divergent behavior, particularly violence. Criminologists Ronald Akers and Robert Burgess joined the principles of social learning theory and operant conditioning with Edwin Sutherland's differential association theory makes a comprehensive theory of criminal behavior. Burgess and Akers emphasized that criminal behavior is well read in both social and non-social conditions through arrangements of direct reinforcement, vicarious reinforcement, clear instruction and observation, and deduced that the likelihood of being uncovered to certain behaviors and the nature of the reinforcement are reliant on group norms. Second is developmental psychology. Social learning theorists underline observable behavior concerning the attainment of these two skills. For gender role progress, the same-sex parent provides only one of many models from which the individual learns gender roles. Social learning theory also highlights the flexible nature of moral progress due to the altering social situations of every decision. In specific factors, child thoughts are varied from situation to situation, depending upon the variables such as which situational factors are operating, which causes are most salient, and what the child processes cognitively. Moral judgments comprise a complex process of assuming and weighing numerous standards in a particular social situation. Third is media violence. Principles of social learning theory have been applied widely to the study of media violence. Akers and Burgess hypothesized that observed or experienced positive rewards and lack of punishment for aggressive behaviors reinforces aggression. Many research studies have revealed important associations between inspecting vicious television and violence later in life, as well as playing vicious video games and aggressive behaviors. The part of observational learning has also been quoted as a significant factor in the rise of rating systems for TV, movies, and video games. Fourth is psychotherapy. Social learning theory assisted salvage learning methods to nervousness disorders by providing that other mechanisms beyond classical conditioning that could lead for the acquisition of fear. For example, social learning theory proposes that a child could get a fear of snakes by noticing a family member express fear in reply to snakes. Otherwise, the child could learn the relations between snakes and unpleasant bites through direct experience without developing excessive fear, but could later learn from others that snakes can have deadly venom, causing a re-evaluation of the acuteness of snake bites and, in view of that, a more exaggerated fear response to snakes. We'll end this module with summary. The growth of social learning theory can be drawn back to the work of Robert Burgess and Ronald Akers in 1966 as presented in their work entitled A Differential Association Reinforcement Theory of Criminal Behavior. The theory as proposed by Akers is focused around the idea that the same learning process in a context of social structure, interaction and situation produces both conforming and deviant behavior. Social learning theory of Bandura suggests that learning is a mental procedure that occurs in a social perspective and can happen only through observation or direct instruction, even in the absenteeism of motor reproduction or direct reinforcement. Differential association theory was developed by Edwin Sutherland, suggesting that by communication with others, person learn the morals, attitudes, methods, and motives for criminal behavior. Social learning theories have vast applications in different fields like criminology, developmental psychology, media violence, psychotherapy, etc.